Well, good morning, everyone. How you doing? Now, firstly, we're still in school holidays. So kids, I'll try to make this as fun for you as I possibly can. Dan has some sermon sheets out in the hub if you want to follow along. Now, look, one thing I think helps kids follow sermons, and probably a fair few adults as well, is if the preacher kind of just comes out with their main point at the start and spends the rest of the time explaining it. I don't think a sermon needs to be a mystery novel, like you can just come out. And so here's my main point. This is where I'm going to be taking you today. God is bringing tons of people to Christ right now. And he wants you to join in. Some of us might find that hard to do, but we need to trust and just give it a go. Everything else I'm going to tell you revolves around that. Now, to help us understand that, I want to look at a Bible passage, and it's John 4:35 to 38. This is Jesus talking. He says, "Don't you have a saying, it's still 4 months until harvest? I tell you, open your eyes. Look at the fields. They're ripe for harvest. Even now, the one who reaps draws a wage and harvests a crop for eternal life, so that the sower and the reaper may be glad together. Thus the saying, one sows and another reaps is true. I sent you to reap what you have not worked for. Others have done the hard work, and you have reaped the benefits of their labour." Now, to just give you the context here, Jesus says this to the disciples when they're in Samaria. This is John 4. Samaritans didn't like Jews very much. They didn't like Jews like Jesus and the disciples. They had not liked each other for centuries to this point. Now, at this point in the story, Jesus' disciples had gone into a village to buy some food, and they come back and they find Jesus talking to a Samaritan woman, and that's just weird. And then they see her just run off into the town. She just leaves her water and just runs off, and that's even weirder. So they're a bit weirded out at this point. And then just at that point, Jesus says something that really weirds them out. He says, "I tell you, open your eyes and look at the fields. They are ripe for harvest." If you're a disciple right now, you would be very confused. Not because you think that Jesus is actually literally expecting you to go and harvest like wheat and stuff, right? The disciples have hung around with Jesus long enough by this point that they know that he likes to use symbolism a fair bit of the time. So they kind of go, okay, he's not meaning this literally. What would weird them out about this is they would figure out that what he's talking about is the same thing that he always means when he talks about harvests and stuff like that, and that is converting people. So what's confusing about this is they'd be looking at him and going, dude, you realize where we are? Okay? We are looking around, and we're in Samaria. Nobody is harvesting Samaritans. Okay? We know how this works. We know the deal. They hate us. No one's harvesting here. See, what they don't know is that Samaritan woman who's just run past them, her conversation with Jesus has completely changed her life. See, they don't know that. Right? So they don't know that she's running off into the town to tell everybody about him. And they don't know that very afternoon, those Samaritans will welcome Jesus and them into their town. And that they'll believe in him that afternoon. They don't know that. The field is ripe for harvest. Jesus is right. But the disciples can't see it. And I am here to tell you today that we, right here, right now, we are in harvest time. Now, maybe you haven't seen it, but it's there. It's already happening. It's already happening across the Western world. And I'm about to show you real statistical data which will blow your mind. Right? To give you some context, ever since kind of COVID, people have just started to notice something. Across England, America, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, like all these kind of places, people have noticed something. After the lockdowns, new people just started coming to church. Just a newbie here, a noob there, that kind of thing. And the other thing is influencers on social media, like at TikTok and Instagram, they started to talk much more positively about Christianity. Podcasters like Joe Rogan and people like that, they started to have more openly Christian guests on, and they're nice to them, which is surprising, right? And some Christian experts just started to ask, is this a thing? Right? Now, there wasn't any clear data to prove that it was a thing, but people were just kind of asking, like, is there something going on here? Right? And then data started coming out from Britain. Right? So Britain has seen a string of things coming out. In November 2024, so just late last year, the Scottish Baptists, of all people, the Scottish Baptists published an exciting report called Increase. Okay? And they've got a YouTube on this, like a YouTube video on this. You can look it up, called the Increase thing by the Scottish Baptists, about like the rate of conversions they're having, churches growing, people being baptized. It's just coming up, right? And then there was a massive report by the British Bible Society that came out in April this year, just a few months ago. And there's a similar report in America that came out in May, but I'm going to focus on the one in England. The British report was based on a massive survey they did. Okay? The British Bible Society did it. And what they discovered was that since COVID, the church in Britain has grown by over 50%. 2 million more people are going to church regularly than they were 5 years ago. Okay? And they called this report the Quiet Revival. Let's go back. All right, there, the Quiet Revival. Okay? It's the Quiet Revival. It hasn't been flashy. It's not like people like falling down in aisles and going crazy or anything like that. It's kind of quiet, right? It's kind of snuck up on us, but it's happening, okay? All right, now, there's no equivalent statistical data for Australia yet, but Australian experts, we've been noticing the same thing that they kind of had happen in England, okay? So we can start to see that there's actually a lot of this going on for us too. Okay, now this report though, it went into greater detail. It broke it down by age, gender, denomination, ethnicity, all kinds of things. So let's take a look at that data, shall we? Right, so here's the data, and you can see that there's the average on the other side there. So that they've gone from 8% of the population to 12%. Okay, right, now, what I want to do is I want to focus to begin with just on the left side of this graph. So can we go to the next one? Right. So note the rate of British people aged 18 to 24 who are now regularly attending church. It has quadrupled. It has quadrupled. It has gone 4 times as much. It's gone from only 4% to 16% in 5 years. Gen Zers, represent. Okay? Congratulations. Your generation is leading a revival of Christianity right now. Now, look, Gen Y, all you millennials out there, you're not far behind. Don't be too discouraged. You're at 13%, which is pretty darn good. That's tripled. Okay? Now let's go a little bit further. Let's break it down by gender. Which side of that, of the men and women, is higher? Isn't that something? The church is growing most in men. Right? Now, for many years, I think we've heard that Christianity is becoming a women's religion. Who's heard that kind of chestnut? That it's becoming more what women want and men don't find. That is not statistically accurate. Okay? Right? Look, don't get me wrong. I mean, women's growth is itself actually also very significant, but the rate of Gen Z men 18 to 24, has quintupled. 5 times more than it was. It's gone from 4% to 21%. You know what that means? 1 in 5 British men who are Gen Zers are going to church regularly. 1 in 5. Right? And look, again, you millennial men, you're not too far behind, 1 in 6. So, having seen this data, how does that make you feel? Does it make you feel excited? Does it make you feel relieved? Right? Does it make you feel relieved? Does it leave you a little skeptical? Where's the catch? Where's the, oh, no, but there's got to be this qualifying factor. No, there's got to be this thing going on. No, right? If you're skeptical, fair enough, I can get you a copy of the report after the service today, and you can just go through that with a fine-tooth comb and things like that. That's totally fine. But I'm curious, if you're skeptical, what age demographic are you? Because, and I say this with absolutely no judgment at all, I wonder if that skepticism is indicative of another finding from this report. Let's look back at the age demographics for a second. I want to look at the other side of the equation. Let's have a look at the ages 45 to 64. Gen Xers, like me. We have not seen this rise in church going among our age demographic. Boomers are still going up. But we're in decline. Yay, okay? It's like you know that old song, "It's my party, but I'll cry if I want to"? It's like there's a big party going on and we're going, no. Now again, I don't want to have any judgment about that. I actually think there are historical reasons for why we would be like this, why we would find this difficult. And I actually think there's historical reasons that explain everything that's going on here. And since I'm an historian, I'm going to tell you what they are. Right? Okay, so the last major Christian growth spurt in Western culture, in places like England and Australia, was this. And there's boomers here who go, oh, I know this one. Okay, so this is the Billy Graham Crusade. This is 1959. That, my friends, is the MCG. And that's how many people came to the last service of the Billy Graham Crusade in 1959. That's still, the Billy Graham's Crusade still has the record attendance at the MCG. Right, the highest attendance, no grand final beats it. Right, but that was 1959, and then we get this, the 60s, and in the 60s, notwithstanding some exceptional fashion choices, society experienced a massive social shift. And part of that shift was a growing antagonism to what I'll call public Christianity. Okay? there's an historian called Tom Holland. He's not Spider-Man, okay? This is Tom Holland, okay? You can't get less Spider-Man than this Tom Holland, right? He's an historian, and he wrote a book called Dominion. And in that book, Holland argues that Western society has been so deeply influenced by Christianity for so long, it doesn't realise how many of its foundational beliefs are actually on the basis of Christianity, right? Okay? What our society thinks is right or fair or justice only makes sense on the basis of Christian assumptions. Okay? Most other cultures throughout history do not think the way we do. They just don't. They haven't. Okay? Even something as foundational to us as human rights. Like with you, when you think of human rights, it's just obvious, isn't it? That we all have human rights. Well, actually, that's not obvious. Most societies do not think in terms of human rights being an inherent thing, that humans have inherent human rights. Why? Because it's culturally unusual because it relies on a Christian notion. It relies on the idea that humans are made in the image of God, right? And thus have an inherent dignity that he has given everyone, male, female, men, women, children, the poor, everybody. If you don't have that underlying assumption about us being made in the image of God, you don't have that as a given. Okay? Right? So what happened from the 1960s is a kind of social experiment. Now, it was really slow at first. It was telling your parents to go to Billy-O and things like that. But effectively, what happened was, it started off slow, but it's been ramping up over time. And here's the social experiment. What if we don't need Christianity anymore? What if we can have all of that good stuff like justice and fairness and human rights and all those kind of things? What if we can have that, but we don't need the Christian bit? Now, as you move through the 70s and the 80s, people still upheld many of these foundational Christian ideas, even at the same time as they were criticising Christianity. Even as they were trying to replace Christianity with something new. Okay? Who, when they look at this retrospectively, goes, yeah, I kind of feel like that's what was going on in the 80s. Right? Yeah, that's what the 90s felt like, right? Okay? This reached its peak pretty much in the 90s and in the early noughties, in the 2000s, right? Then there was still a lot of Christian underpinnings, and they had worked so well that they created a terrific society. 90s Australia and the West, it was great. Like, it really was great, okay? It was great. And what our society had come to is they genuinely convinced themselves we could have our cake and eat it too. We could have all the great stuff that Christianity brings in terms of morality and prosperity and peace, but we didn't have to be Christian. Okay? And so, to all my Gen X friends, this explains why mission in that period was so darn hard. Okay? Do you remember trying to evangelize to your non-Christian friends back in the 90s and the noughties? Well, that was fun now, wasn't it? Yeah, right? Even telling them that you were a Christian, you could get into some really nasty arguments. It could cost you. Who remembers that? Huh? Right? Okay, do you remember how scared you felt? Do you remember as a 90s teenager, right, early 20s, maybe you're at university, do you remember how scary it was? Like, it wasn't communist China, it wasn't the Middle East or something, but it was scary, right? You could lose friends. You could lose jobs. Who had that? All right? Why? Because people had come to think they could get all of the good stuff Christianity brings without being Christian. No thanks, I'm good. What has Christianity ever done for us? Well, okay? And that affected how we did mission, if we did mission. Right? If I'm really harsh, a lot of the time, when I look back at that period, and I was one of the people who was part of this, we used bait and switch tactics an awful lot. You know what that is? Bait and switch is, here, come for the food, ha, we tricked you, here's Jesus. Right? Okay? How many times did you invite people to church because there was really cool music and there were really flashy lights and there was a really funky preacher who spoke with really trendy clothes? And you know what I mean? Like, how many of us did that? Right? How many of us invited people to youth group because there was a really good games night and we just hoped they'd not notice that there was a 5-minute Jesus Devo at the end? Right? We had just become so culturally conditioned by what everyone was telling us that we believed you had to fool people into hanging around with Christians long enough that somehow they just figured out we're really not that bad and that Jesus isn't really that bad. And that if you let them just hang around by kind of osmosis for a couple of months or years, but you didn't push too hard, they might somehow, possibly, perhaps, sort of become Christian. Am I wrong? Coming back to our passage, Jesus says this, don't you have a saying, it's still 4 months until harvest? Well, I tell you, open your eyes, look at the fields, they're ripe for harvest. What he's making here is a distinction, right, between trying to farm in winter, 4 months until harvest, and springtime. There's a difference in the way that you handle, putting in a winter crop. How many of you are gardeners here? How many of you find that thing where you just chuck seeds everywhere during winter and it is a complete and utter flipping waste of time? Right? It's cold, it's dark, and so you just end up with like these little snow peas that are like, the plants are like this big, and you're like, why do I even bother? But springtime, man, springtime, you can't stop things growing. It's just, right? Well, what you have to realize, everyone, is we Gen Xers, we were brought up in winter. Okay? We tried to get a harvest in winter, but it was flipping hard. By the early noughties, like the 2000s, we had flipping neo-atheists putting things on buses telling us that everything was Christianity's fault. It wasn't Christianity that had helped society, it was us. It was our fault that everything was wrong. You know, we had people saying, oh, well, everyone will become atheist in 5 seconds flat. You know, we had survey after survey, census after census telling us Christianity was in decline. It was really demoralizing. That experiment in abandoning Christianity was in full swing, which leads us to you, millennials. Because you grew up in the midst of the largest deconstruction of Christian influence in Western history. How'd that work out for you? Well, the world just got better and better, didn't it? No. It actually just got more crazy. And the best part, everyone blamed you. Right? People said, you were so lazy, or so spoiled, or so this, or so that. Back in my day, we could do this or that. What's your problem? Yeah, well, it was a hell of a lot easier back in your day. Right? Society back then didn't have the internet, but at least they were sane. We've landed in a crazy show. And Gen Zers, guess what? It's even worse by the time you showed up, right? Gender roles were completely confused by that. I'm just taking that as an example, leaving aside the craziest gender issues for a second, just getting back to the basics. You were told that all of these old-fashioned expectations of a woman or a man, like based on Christian principles, were outdated and they were to be replaced. With what we're not sure, but they should be replaced, right? Women, go to work. More of you should go work. Don't have kids. Well, have kids, but not too early, but don't leave it till late. Go to uni. Have kids eventually, hopefully, maybe, I'm not really sure. Become a feminist. No, become a trad wife. Don't be a thought, right? Just find a guy, but not that guy. Ditch the guy. Have no guy at all. Do it all yourself. You're lonely? Oh, how did that happen? Stuff it, just shut up and watch a screen. Am I wrong? And men. Oh, men. All right? Previous generations had said, be a man. What the hell is that exactly? If you're a nice guy, you're just a soy boy. If you stand up for yourself, well, that's toxic masculinity. And the key thing that they told our men was that you, male, are the cause of all the world's problems. And you are the cause of all the world's problems, especially if you want to be a decent guy. If you want to marry a decent girl. If you want to get a job, what job? If you want to find a house, what house? If you want to have kids and live the life that everybody had found so easy to have just 20 years before. And then COVID hit. And I think that was the moment that made us all realize that this deconstructing of Christianity experiment sucks. And not just because we'd all lost the ideals Christianity had given us that made the world sane. It was that atheism had told us that the world came from nothing, and we suddenly realized that that was all that it was actually offering us. Nothing. What's the point? And so some people, young guys in particular, they said, no. Not anymore. I'm going to ditch the social media. I'm going to ditch the porn. I'm going to ditch the self-loathing. I'm getting out and I'm going to the gym. I'm eating right and I'm watching Jordan Peterson. And I'm going to get my life sorted out. I'm going to get more disciplined. This self-discipline thing's hard. It's worth it, but it's hard. I can't do it. I want to, but I can't. I need help. And they found Jesus Christ waiting to help them. Because through his Spirit, that is what he does. And then all of them, boys, girls, everyone, they started realizing what they really needed. What they really needed is Jesus. Not just his help, they needed him, his love, his power, his presence, and that's when he came. That's when he came through his Spirit and he blew all over them, and here we are, a quiet revival. Is there more to come? Well, I'm going to blow you away with one last stat. The Bible Society, when they did their thing, they also asked non-Christians how keen they were to go to church. And do you know what they said? 1 in 3 of them said they would be keen to go to church if somebody invited them. 1 in 3. Gen Xers, what would be your expectation? If you were asking a person, a group of people, what's your rate? 1 in 20? 1 in 50? 1 in 100? And what would the other 99 do to you if you asked, like when you were a young guy, right? Would they just go, no thanks, I'm good? Or would they rip you to shreds? That is how we lived. We lived with, if I asked 100 people, 99% of them would tell me to get stuffed. Now, 1 in 3 say yes. Okay, I'm going to give you a few quick stories. I'm nearly out of time, but I'll tell you some quick stories because they're fun. Okay, I was recently at a high school, and the chaplain who was there, he saw me chatting to a kid, and he said to the kid, "Hey, tell Matt your testimony of how you came to Christ." And he went, "Okay, sure." And so this is the story you told me. He said, "Okay, I've got atheist parents, so they'd never let me go to church, but I wanted to go to church for about 4 years, but I couldn't tell anyone because of my parents. And then this guy, he sent me a text inviting me to his youth group. I went to that, and then I became a Christian. I got baptized, and I'm there." I went, "Wow, that's a great story. So, you and this guy, you must have been texting for a while." And he went, "No." I went, "How many texts did he send you before he invited you to his youth group?" He went, "None. That was the first text." And I went, "Okay. So, but you'd been friends with him for many years." And he went, "No. We did a social thing a year ago. He got my number then. He didn't contact me for a year. Then he invited me to youth group and I went. And I convinced my parents, my atheist parents, on the basis of that one text after 1 year." Does this sound like winter or springtime harvesting to you? Okay? Springtime is here. Okay? I do shopping on Sundays, and I'm, to my children's shame, I spend a large proportion of my time talking to the checkout chicks, the people doing stuff. "How's your day?" and that kind of thing. I've had 2 of them without knowing what I do. "How was your day?" "Great, I went to church this morning." Can you imagine a 20-year-old or someone like that volunteering that just casually to a total stranger? That's happening. One of them got baptized that morning. She was showing off. Another one, he's been a Christian for a year. He's doing an internship with his church. He wants to become a pastor. The other day I got a haircut. My barber was a young guy. He was in his early 20s, and he asked me what I do, and I told him. And then he said, "That's really interesting timing, because I went to church for the first time 2 days ago on Sunday." And I went, "Why?" And he went, "Because my brother became a Christian. He invited me." And I went, "Why would you become a Christian?" And he said, "Because I saw what my brother was like before he was a Christian, and Jesus Christ has changed his life." And I said to him, "Well, okay, interesting timing. If you have a guy like me, who's like a theology lecturer, walk through the door and get a haircut with you 2 days afterwards, maybe the Lord's doing something for you. So I tell you what, ask me any question you like. Do you have anything that's worrying you?" And he said, "I'll tell you what the main thing is that worries me. What happens when I die? Could you explain to me how I can not worry about when I die?" So I sit there and I do the same thing that we've always thought was really hard to do. I told him the gospel. Jesus died for your sins and he rose again to give you a new life, eternal life. And then he said, "Thank you." He didn't give me a free haircut, but he said, "Thank you." This is springtime stuff. It's easy, it's fun. Coming back to my passage, "Even now the one who reaps draws a wage and harvests a crop for eternal life, so that the sower and the reaper may be glad together." We were glad together, he and I. Now, this is going to take the biggest mind shift for Gen Xers. Okay? Jesus also said, "Thus the saying, one sows and another reaps is true. I sent you to reap what you have not worked for. Others have done the hard work, and you have reaped the benefits of their labour." Gen Zers, millennials, you've got to be kind to us Gen Xers. We are burned. It's going to be really hard for us to believe that it's actually this easy. We kept the faith in the hard times, in the winter times. I know of at least one pastor who got fired, one youth pastor who got fired because they stopped doing games night and they dedicated their entire youth group program to prayer, to Bible study, because the kids don't want games. They didn't want games, they just wanted Jesus. right? And their youth group was growing, but their pastor, who had been a youth pastor in the 90s, went, no. Your church, I know how youth ministry works. You've got to give them the games. You've got to give them the bait and switch. They'll leave in droves. And they were like, that's just not the season we're in. So Gen Xers, my last thing to say is a little bit of an encouragement for you. First of all, don't stifle what the Lord is doing. But put more positively, that stat of 1 in 3 people saying yes, that is not limited by age demographic. Okay? Right? You don't think a ton of your workmates and your friends and you don't think they're sick and tired of the experiment? You don't think they want something different? The fields are ripe for harvest. Look up. The harvest is plentiful. Let's be the workers, joining in what he's doing. Thanks.